The first shot came at 2,347 meters, a distance most shooters can't even see, let alone hit. The target dropped before the sound arrived, and in that moment, everyone who'd called her diversity hire went silent. Because Second Lieutenant Mara Keene, the woman they said didn't belong, had just saved 12 lives with one trigger pull. But that was the easy part. What came next? The burning vehicles, the armored death machine, and the moment she had to run into hell with nothing but an empty RPG launcher, that's when the real test began. Before we dive into this story, do me a favor. Stick around until the very end to see how Mara's final stand changes everything. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. Now let's go back to where it all started. The thing about being underestimated is that people get comfortable. They stop watching. They stop expecting. And that's when you have room to work. Mara Keene learned that long before she ever stepped foot in Outpost Red Haven. The desert air at 0400 hours tasted like copper and diesel, a flavor she'd grown familiar with over the past 6 months. The prep tent stood at the eastern edge of the outpost, canvas walls flapping in the pre-dawn wind, lanterns casting harsh white light that made everyone look like exhausted ghosts. Which, Mara supposed, wasn't far from the truth. She stood near the back corner, rifle case vertical beside her boot, fingers resting light on the handle. Not gripping, not fidgeting, just there. The kind of stillness her father used to call shooter's calm, the ability to exist in chaos without contributing to it. Priority extract, high-value target, 16 clicks northeast in the Sawtooth Canyon complex. Major Cordero's voice cut through the murmur of equipment checks and nervous energy. He was a barrel-chested man with a face carved from decades of hard decisions, pointing at the satellite imagery projected on the portable screen. Intel officer, captured 72 hours ago. Windows closing. They're moving him at dawn. Mara's eyes tracked the terrain. Canyon walls, natural choke points, elevated positions marked in red. Her mind was already calculating angles, wind patterns, dead zones. Compounds run by ex-Spetsnaz contractors, Cordero continued. Professional, disciplined. They know we're coming, they just don't know when. Sergeant First Class Vance, a broad-shouldered operator with 20 years of trigger time, leaned forward. ROE. Weapons free on hostile forces. Civilian structures are marked. Avoid unless actively engaged. Cordero's finger traced the assault route. Primary team goes in hard and fast. 4-minute window from breach to extract. Overwatch covers the approach and provides suppression as needed. The tent went quiet. Cordero turned, and his eyes landed on Mara. Second Lieutenant Keene, you're Overwatch, and... The silence changed texture. It went from tactical focus to something else, something that felt like a held breath, like doubt crystallizing into words nobody wanted to say out loud. Corporal Jace Rollins, perched on an ammo crate near the front, didn't even try to hide his reaction. He exhaled through his nose, the kind of sound that said, "You've got to be kidding me," without using words. Mara kept her face neutral. "Yes, sir." Raven Ridge, 1,200 meters northwest of the compound. Single shooter, spotter optional. You hold that position until we're clear or until I call you off. Cordero's tone didn't invite debate. Questions? No, sir. Good. Wheels up in 20. The briefing broke apart. Operators moving to gear up, voices low and clipped. Mara picked up her rifle case and started toward the exit. She made it 3 steps before she heard it. Dead weight. It was barely a murmur, somewhere behind her, swallowed quickly by the sound of magazines being loaded and straps being tightened. She didn't turn around, didn't react, just kept walking. Outside, the desert stretched black and infinite under a sky so thick with stars it looked like someone had shattered glass across velvet. The temperature had dropped into the 40s, cold enough to make her breath visible in the floodlights. Mara set her case down beside the staging area and opened it with practiced efficiency. Inside, the MK-22 PSR, her primary weapon. Bolt action, .300 Norma Magnum, fully suppressed. Matte black finish, bipod folded, scope cover still on. She'd zeroed it twice yesterday, triple-checked the mounting tension, cleaned every surface until it gleamed. You really think you're ready for this? Mara didn't flinch. She'd heard Rollins approach, boots on gravel, confident stride, the sound of a man who expected to be listened to. She straightened, meeting his eyes. He was older, maybe 35, with the kind of weathered face that came from too many deployments and not enough sleep. His plate carrier was loaded with magazines, grenades, medical supplies. A man built for close-quarters battle, not long-range precision. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't," Mara said evenly. Rollins smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "You wouldn't be here if it wasn't for politics." "That what you think?" "That's what I know." He glanced at her rifle. "Nice hardware. Bet you shot expert at the range, right? Controlled conditions, paper targets, instructors holding your hand." Mara felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the anger that wanted to rise, the words that wanted to snap back. She swallowed them, turned back to her rifle. "Confidence doesn't stop bullets, Lieutenant." Rollins' voice dropped lower. "And when shit goes sideways, and it will, I don't want to be the one dragging your body back because you thought you could handle something you weren't built for." Mara's hand stilled on the rifle. She looked up again, and this time her voice was quiet, controlled. "You done?" Rollins held her gaze for a long moment. Then he shook his head and walked away. Mara exhaled slowly. 4 count in, hold, 6 count out. The breathing technique her father taught her when she was 12, standing in the woods behind their house in Montana with a .22 rifle that felt enormous in her small hands. Shooting isn't about strength, kiddo. It's about control. Heart rate, breathing, mind. You master those, the rifle's just a tool. He'd been a police sharpshooter, died when she was 16. Heart attack, sudden and cruel. Left her with his rifle, his notebooks, and a belief that precision mattered more than power. She'd carried that belief through college, ROTC, through officer training, through every qualification course and evaluation board that looked at her and saw a liability instead of an asset. And she'd carry it tonight. "Keen." She turned. Staff Sergeant Yolanda Cross stood a few feet away, helmet already on, eyes sharp. Cross was the team medic, compact, efficient, with the kind of calm that came from stitching people back together under fire. "Yeah?" "Ignore Rollins." Cross's voice was matter-of-fact. "He's got issues with everyone. You just happen to be new and female, which makes you an easy target. I noticed." "You good?" Mara nodded. "I'm good." Cross studied her for a moment, then handed her a small packet. "Protein bar. You're going to be on that ridge for hours. Don't let your blood sugar drop." "Thanks. Don't thank me. Just do your job." Cross turned to leave, then paused. "And Keen? For what it's worth, Cordero doesn't put people in critical positions as a favor. He does it because he thinks they can handle it." Mara watched her walk away, then pocketed the protein bar and went back to her gear check. 15 minutes later, the helicopter's rotors began to spin. The MH-60. Blackhawk was loud, dark, and vibrating like it wanted to shake itself apart. Mara sat near the door, rifle case strapped between her knees, helmet pressing against her skull. The crew chief had already run through the safety brief, shouting over the engine noise, pointing at emergency exits nobody would ever reach in time if things went wrong. The bird lifted off, nose dipping forward as it accelerated into the night. Mara pulled down her night vision goggles. The world turned green, the desert below a monochrome wasteland of rocks, scrub brush, and shadows. The mountains rose like broken teeth on the horizon, jagged peaks cutting into the starfield. Across from her, Rollins sat with his rifle across his lap, eyes closed. Next to him, Sergeant Vance was checking radio frequencies. Cross had her aid bag open, inventorying supplies for the 3rd time. Major Cordero sat beside the crew chief, headset on, studying a tablet with the mission overlay. Nobody spoke. The rotor noise made conversation pointless anyway. Mara focused on her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. She ran through the checklist in her head. Range cards, wind calculations, ballistic data, backup plans. She'd studied the satellite imagery until she could navigate the terrain with her eyes closed. She knew the angles, the dead zones, the likely enemy positions. She was ready. The question was whether anyone else believed it. The helicopter banked hard, dropping altitude as the mountains rose around them. The pilot was flying nap of the earth, using terrain to mask their approach. Mara's stomach lurched, but she kept her breathing steady. 10 minutes later, the crew chief held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes to landing zone. Mara unstrapped her rifle case and began her final prep. Scope covers off. Bipod deployed. Chamber check. Everything smooth, everything exact. The helicopter flared, wheels touching down on a ridge 2 clicks from the target compound. The crew chief slapped the hull twice. Go, go, go. Mara was out before the skids fully settled, moving low and fast away from the rotor wash. The rest of the team followed, spreading out in a defensive perimeter as the helicopter lifted off and disappeared into the darkness. Silence crashed over them. Cordero raised a fist. Hold position. Everyone froze, scanning sectors, weapons ready. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Nothing. Cordero's hand dropped, pointing northeast. Move. They moved. What? The hike to Raven Ridge took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of scrambling over loose rock, threading through narrow gullies, moving fast enough to stay on schedule, but slow enough to stay silent. Mara's pack weighed 47 pounds, rifle, ammunition, water, emergency supplies, and enough ballistic data to engage targets out to 1,800 meters. Her shoulders burned, her thighs burned, her lungs burned. She didn't slow down. The terrain was unforgiving. Loose shale that shifted underfoot, thorny scrub that grabbed at clothing, sudden drops that appeared without warning in the darkness. Twice she almost went down, catching herself on sharp rock that sliced through her gloves. Rollins was 10 meters ahead, setting the pace. He moved like a machine, steady, relentless, indifferent to the weight or the altitude or the heat radiating off the rocks. Mara kept up. They reached the split point at 05:12 hours. Cordero held up a fist again, and everyone took a knee. Primary assault team, continue to staging position echo. His voice was barely a whisper through the radio. Keen, Raven Ridge is 300 meters northeast, elevation gain of 60 meters. You have 20 minutes to set up. Copy, Mara murmured. Call sign is Watcher 1. Report when you're in position. Watcher 1. Understood. Cordero nodded once. Then he turned to Rollins, Vance, and Cross. Let's move. They disappeared into the darkness like smoke. Mara was alone. She adjusted her pack, checked her compass bearing, and started climbing. Raven Ridge wasn't a ridge so much as a knife edge of rock jutting out from the canyon wall. 50 meters long, barely 3 meters wide, with a sheer drop on the northern side and a steep scree slope on the south. It was perfect. Mara reached the position at 05:29 hours and immediately began setting up. She moved with practiced efficiency, every action precise. First, the shooting mat. Unrolled on the flattest section of rock, positioned to maximize stability and minimize exposure. Second, the rifle. Bipod deployed, rear bag positioned, scope adjusted for elevation and parallax. Third, the rangefinder, aimed at the compound below, measuring distances to key landmarks. Main gate, 1,247 meters. Guard tower, 1,198 meters. Courtyard, 1,315 meters. She logged each number, building a mental map. Fourth, the wind meter. Reading showed gusting from the southwest at 8 to 12 miles per hour. Variable. She'd have to compensate on every shot. Fifth, communication check. Watcher 1 in position. Cordero's voice crackled back immediately. Copy, Watcher 1. Stand by. Mara settled in behind the rifle, cheek pressed to the stock, eye aligned with the scope. Below, the compound sprawled across a natural bowl in the canyon. 3 buildings, 2 single-story structures and 1 larger 2-story building that probably served as headquarters. Concrete walls, corrugated metal roofs, generator humming somewhere out of sight. Floodlights at each corner, bright enough to wash out her night vision if she looked directly at them. She counted guards. 2 on the tower, 3 patrolling the perimeter, 1 near the main gate. Movement inside the buildings. Shadows crossing windows, too indistinct to count. Professional, disciplined, exactly like Cordero had said. Mara checked her watch. 05:34 hours. The assault team would be in position in 11 minutes. She slowed her breathing, felt her heart rate drop from the climb, settling into the low 60s, relaxed her grip on the rifle, let the tension drain from her shoulders. This was the part she was good at, the waiting, the watching. The moment between heartbeats where the world narrows to a single point of focus. Her father had called it the quiet. When you're in the quiet, kiddo, nothing else matters. Not the noise, not the fear, not what anyone thinks of you. Just the target and the trigger. Everything else is just static. Mara exhaled slowly and entered the quiet. At 0545 hours, Cordero's voice whispered through her earpiece. Watcher 1, primary team is set. We initiate in 2 minutes. Call any changes. Mara's eye never left the scope. Watcher 1 copies. No change. Pattern holding. The guards continued their patrol routes. Predictable, mechanical. One near the tower just lit a cigarette, the glow bright through her optic. 60 seconds. Mara's thumb moved to the safety. Off. She chambered around. The bolt slid forward with a metallic whisper, seeding the .300 Norma Magnum cartridge into battery. Her breathing slowed further, 4 beats in. Hold, 6 beats out. 30 seconds. The guard on the tower leaned against the railing, rifle slung across his back. Complacent. 10 seconds. Mara's finger rested on the trigger. Light pressure. Not enough to break the shot. Just ready. 5, 4, 3. And that's when everything went wrong. A guard stepped out of the main building. Someone new, someone not on the pattern, and walked directly toward the courtyard where the assault team was about to breach. Hold, hold, hold! Cordero's voice was sharp. Roving sentry, northwest corner. Mara tracked him through the scope. Young, alert, carrying his rifle at the ready instead of slung. He was 20 meters from the breach point and closing. Watcher 1, can you take him without alerting the tower? The tower guards were 40 meters away from the sentry. If he went down loud, they'd react. If they reacted, the assault failed. Mara calculated angles, wind, bullet drop. The sentry was moving, roughly 2 miles per hour, perpendicular to her position. Watcher 1 can take the shot, she said quietly. Suppressed. Tower won't hear. Stand by. 5 seconds passed. The sentry kept walking. Take the shot. Mara's world collapsed to a single point. The reticle settled on center mass, leading the target by 6 inches to account for movement. Wind was pushing right to left, 8 miles per hour. She adjusted a 1/4 mil dot. Breath out. Heartbeat slowing, finger pressure increasing. The trigger broke. The rifle bucked, suppressor hissing, and 1,200 meters away the sentry dropped like someone had cut his strings. No scream, no shot fired. Just down. The tower guards didn't react. Good hit. Cordero's voice was calm. Breach in 5. Mara chambered another round, already scanning for the next threat. 3, 2, 1, execute. The assault team moved like shadows, flowing across the courtyard toward the main building. Mara tracked their progress through her scope, scanning for reaction. It came fast. A guard on the far side of the compound saw movement and raised his rifle, finger already moving to the trigger. Mara fired. The guard went down. Then the lights came on. All of them. Floodlights, building lights, vehicle lights. The entire compound lit up like noon, and the alarms started screaming. Contact! Vance's voice punched through the radio. Multiple hostiles, east wall! Gunfire erupted. Sharp, staccato bursts of automatic weapons fire, the sound rolling up the canyon like thunder. Watcher 1, tower guards are engaging the team. Need them down now! Mara swung the rifle to the tower. 2 guards, both firing down at the courtyard, muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness. First shot, the guard on the left. He spun backward, rifle clattering away. Second shot, the guard on the right. He dropped forward, slumping over the railing. Tower clear! But more were coming. Doors banged open, fighters pouring out of the buildings, some in body armor, some in civilian clothes, all carrying weapons. They spread out with tactical precision, setting up firing positions, coordinating fields of fire. We're pinned! Rollins's voice was tight. Southwest corner, heavy machine gun. Mara found it. A PKM machine gun mounted on a tripod, gunner crouched behind a concrete barrier, laying down suppressive fire that chewed chunks out of the wall where the assault team was sheltering. Range, 1,289 meters. Wind, gusting 12 miles per hour, variable direction. She waited for a lull in the gusts, breathed out, and fired. The gunner's head snapped back. "Machine gun down!" "Casualty," Cross's voice cut through. "Vance is hit, leg wound, arterial bleed." Mara's heart rate spiked, but her hand stayed steady. She scanned for the next threat and found it. Behind a technical truck on the east side, a squad leader was organizing a counterattack. 6 fighters moving to flank the assault team's position. Mara put a round through his chest. The fighters scattered, but they didn't retreat. They dove for cover and kept coming, disciplined and coordinated. "We can't stay here." Cordero's voice was steady but urgent. "Watcher 1, we need to move the package to the extract point, but we're still taking fire from the northeast building." Mara shifted her scope to the building. 3 shooters in the windows firing controlled bursts. She engaged the first. Miss. The round sparked off the window frame. She adjusted, breathed, fired again. Hit. Second shooter saw his partner go down and pulled back from the window. Smart. Third shooter kept firing, muzzle flash, giving away his position. Mara waited for him to pause to reload. "Got him. Northeast building suppressed. Moving now." Through her scope, Mara watched the assault team sprint across open ground, cross-dragging Vance while Rollins and Cordero provided covering fire. They had the intel officer, a thin man in torn clothing, hands zip-tied, stumbling between them. They were halfway to the extract point when the headlights appeared. 2 technical trucks racing down the canyon access road, heavy machine guns mounted in the beds, maybe 30 seconds out. "Watcher 1, we've got reinforcements incoming from the south. 2 vehicles, crew-served weapons." Mara swung her rifle to track them. Moving targets, high speed, bad angle. She couldn't stop the gunners. The trucks were bouncing too much, the range too far for a precision shot on a moving platform. But she could stop the trucks. She aimed low, leading the first vehicle, and fired at the front tire. Miss, adjust, breathe, fire. The tire exploded, rubber shredding, and the truck swerved hard, but the driver compensated, keeping it moving. Mara shifted targets. The second truck was accelerating, trying to get past the first. She didn't aim for the tires this time. She aimed for the exposed fuel tank mounted on the truck bed. The shot was absurd. Moving target, 1,200 meters, variable wind, a target the size of a dinner plate. She fired anyway. The fuel tank ruptured. For half a second, nothing happened. Then fire blossomed, orange and violent, and the truck became a rolling bomb. It swerved, flipped, and rolled 3 times before slamming into the canyon wall in a cascade of sparks and twisted metal. The first truck slammed on the brakes, fighters bailing out, diving for cover. "Holy shit!" Rollins' voice was stunned. "Did Watcher 1 just—" "Focus!" Cordero snapped. "Keep moving!" But the fighters from the truck were already setting up a firing line, and more were coming from the compound. The assault team was caught in the open, 30 meters from the extract point, with Vance bleeding and the intel officer barely able to walk. "Watcher 1, we need—" The transmission cut off. Mara's blood went cold. "Say again, all stations. Watcher 1 did not copy." Static. "Cordero, Cross, Rollins, respond." More static. Then a new sound reached her ears, low, mechanical, growing louder. She swept her scope across the compound and felt her stomach drop. An armored personnel carrier was rolling through the main gate. 8 wheels, angled armor, a turret-mounted autocannon that could shred the assault team in seconds. And her rifle wouldn't even scratch the paint. Mara's mind raced. The team was out of position, communications were down, and they had maybe 90 seconds before that carrier got into firing position. She could run. Exfil to the emergency rally point, report the failure, live to fight another day. But 12 people would die, including the intel officer, including her team. Mara's eyes locked onto something in the burning wreckage of the technical truck, an RPG launcher, intact, just lying there in the firelight, maybe 40 meters from the burning vehicle. It was suicide. She'd have to leave the ridge, cross 300 meters of open ground, retrieve the launcher, and engage an armored target at close range, all while under fire from experienced fighters with thermal optics and automatic weapons. But it was the only chance they had. Mara keyed her radio one more time. "Watcher 1 is leaving overwatch position. Going mobile." No response. She grabbed her sidearm, left the rifle, and started running down the ridge toward the burning truck and the waiting nightmare below. Behind her, the armored carrier's engine growled louder, grinding toward her team like a mechanized predator. And Second Lieutenant Mara Keene, the woman they called Deadweight, sprinted straight into hell. The first 30 meters were pure adrenaline and terror. Mara hit the scree slope at a dead sprint, boots sliding on loose rock, gravity yanking her forward faster than her legs could compensate. She went down hard on her left side, ribs slamming into a jagged stone that punched the air from her lungs. Pain exploded white-hot across her torso, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. She scrambled back to her feet, tasted copper, and kept running. The desert floor rushed up to meet her. She stumbled onto flatter ground, legs burning, chest screaming for oxygen. The burning technical truck was 100 meters ahead, flames licking 40 feet into the night sky, black smoke pouring upward in a churning column. The heat hit her face like a physical wall even at this distance. Behind her, gunfire erupted in rapid bursts. The assault team was still fighting, still pinned down. She had maybe 2 minutes before that armored carrier rolled into position and ended everything. Mara sprinted toward the wreckage, every breath like inhaling broken glass. Her sidearm, a Sig Sauer M17, bounced against her thigh in its holster. 15 rounds. Against an entire compound of armed fighters and an armored vehicle, it was laughably inadequate. The RPG launcher was visible now, lying in the dirt 20 meters from the burning truck, illuminated by the firelight. It looked intact. Olive drab tube, grip assembly still attached, no obvious damage. 50 meters out, she heard shouting in Russian. Voices coordinating, calling out positions. They'd seen her. Mara threw herself into a shallow ditch, hitting the ground just as automatic fire ripped overhead. Rounds cracked past her position, snapping through the air with that distinctive supersonic whip crack that meant they were close. Too close. She pressed flat against the earth, sucking in dust and smoke, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. The ditch was barely 2 feet deep, enough to break line of sight, but not enough to stop bullets if they adjusted their aim. More shouting, footsteps running, at least 2 fighters moving to flank her position. Mara's hand found her sidearm, drew it, thumbed off the safety. The first fighter appeared at the ditch edge, young, maybe 20, wearing mismatched body armor and carrying an AK-74. His eyes went wide when he saw her. Mara shot him twice in the chest before he could raise his rifle. He went down without a sound, and she was already rolling left as the second fighter opened fire, rounds chewing into the dirt where she'd been half a second earlier. She came up on one knee, sighted, fired 3 times. The fighter stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, and disappeared behind a cluster of rocks. No time to confirm the kill. Mara was up and running again, legs pumping, lungs burning, the launcher now just 30 feet away. The world turned orange. The explosion came from behind her, a massive percussion wave that lifted her off her feet and slammed her face first into the ground. Her ears went silent except for a high-pitched ringing that drowned out everything else. She couldn't tell if she was screaming. She rolled onto her back, vision swimming, looked up. The armored carrier had fired its autocannon, not at her but at the assault team's position. Chunks of rock and concrete rained down across the compound. Through the smoke and dust, she could see the carrier advancing, turret rotating, searching for the next target. Mara forced herself to move, crawled forward on her elbows, ribs shrieking protest, vision blurring. Her hands found the launcher. Solid, real, heavy. She checked it with trembling fingers. 1 rocket loaded in the tube. 2 more warheads lying in the dirt nearby, still in their protective wrapping. The carrier's engine roared louder. Close now. Maybe 60 meters. Mara grabbed the spare warheads, stuffed them awkwardly into her cargo pockets, and hoisted the launcher onto her shoulder. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She'd fired an RPG exactly 3 times in training, all 3 under controlled conditions, with instructors watching, against stationary targets in broad daylight. This was none of those things. She steadied her breathing. 4 in, hold, 6 out. Her father's voice echoed in her head, calm and certain. Control what you can control, kiddo. Everything else is just noise. Mara rose to a crouch, sighted through the launcher's crude iron sights, and aimed at the carrier's side armor, the thinnest section, just below the turret ring. The carrier was moving, angled slightly away from her, exhaust ports glowing red-hot in the darkness. She led the target, exhaled, squeezed the trigger. The rocket screamed out of the tube with a sound like tearing metal, backblast kicking up a wall of dust and superheated air behind her. The warhead covered 60 meters in under a second and slammed into the carrier's flank. The explosion was enormous. Flash of white light, shrapnel screaming outward, smoke billowing. But when it cleared, the carrier was still moving. The armor had held. The rocket had scarred the plating, maybe damaged some external components, but it hadn't penetrated. The turret swiveled toward her. Mara's blood went cold. She dropped the empty launcher, yanked one of the spare warheads from her pocket, and started reloading with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. Her fingers fumbled the first attempt. The warhead slipped, nearly fell. She caught it, forced herself to slow down, aligned the contact prongs, seated in the tube, locked the safety collar. The autocannon barrel tracked toward her position. She shouldered the launcher again. No time to aim properly, just point and pray. The first autocannon burst chewed through the dirt 10 feet to her left, tracers burning bright green trails through the smoke. She could feel the impacts through the ground, like a giant hammering the earth. Mara fired. This rocket hit the turret ring, the junction where the turret met the hull. Metal screamed, hydraulics ruptured, and the turret froze mid-rotation, stuck at a 45-degree angle. Still not dead, but crippled. The carrier lurched to a stop, engine revving as the driver tried to maneuver, but the turret couldn't traverse. It was locked. Mara grabbed the last warhead. Her hands were steadier now, not calm, but functional. She'd crossed some invisible line where panic became focus, where fear became fuel. Third rocket loaded. This time she took an extra second to aim. The engine compartment, rear armor, thinner than the front, vulnerable if she could hit the exhaust manifold or fuel lines. The carrier started reversing, trying to angle away from her. Mara adjusted, led the target, and fired. The warhead punched through the rear grille and detonated inside the engine bay. The explosion was different this time, deeper, more sustained, followed by secondary blasts as ammunition cooked off. Flames poured out of the crew hatches, thick black smoke rolling skyward. The carrier shuddered and died. Mara dropped the empty launcher and keyed her radio, hands still shaking. Watcher 1 to all stations. Armored threat neutralized. Static. Then Cordero's voice cut through, raw and breathless. Copy, Watcher 1. Where the hell are you? Ground level, near the burning technical. Stay there. We're coming to you. Mara started to reply when movement caught her eye. 20 meters away, a fighter emerged from behind the wreckage, rifle up, finger on the trigger. She drew her sidearm and fired without thinking. 2 shots. He went down. Another fighter appeared, then another. They were converging on her position, drawn by the explosions like moths to flame. Watcher 1 is under fire! She backpedaled toward a cluster of rocks, firing as she moved. Multiple hostiles, close range. Hold on, Rollins' voice. We're 60 seconds out. 60 seconds felt like an eternity. Mara made it to the rocks and pressed her back against stone, ejecting her magazine. 5 rounds left. She slammed in a fresh mag from her belt, her last one. 15 rounds. That was all she had. Gunfire raked the rocks, chips of stone stinging her face. She blind fired twice over the barrier just to make them think, then ducked back down. Footsteps running, close. She popped up, acquired a target, a fighter sprinting toward her flank, and dropped him with 3 rounds. Swung left, found another, fired. Click. Misfire. She racked the slide, ejecting the bad round, and fired again. The fighter stumbled but kept coming. Mara shot him twice more. He finally went down. Slide locked back. Empty. She dropped the magazine, reached for her belt. No more mags. She'd used her last one. The fighter she'd shot in the shoulder earlier appeared on her right, rifle raised, blood soaking his shirt, but his eyes bright with rage and adrenaline. Mara threw her empty pistol at his face. He flinched, and she closed the distance in 2 steps, grabbing his rifle barrel and yanking it sideways as he fired. The muzzle blast deafened her left ear completely, but the rounds went wide. She drove her knee into his wounded shoulder. He screamed, grip loosening, and she ripped the AK-74 from his hands, swung the stock into his jaw. He dropped. Mara spun, rifle up. and came face to face with three more fighters, all with weapons aimed at her center mass. She was out of options, out of ammunition, out of miracles. They were shouting at her in Russian, gesturing with their rifles. "Drop the weapon! Get on the ground!" Mara's finger tightened on the trigger. She could take maybe one of them before they cut her down. Her father's voice whispered in her head, "Sometimes the brave thing isn't pulling the trigger, kiddo. Sometimes it's knowing when not to." She lowered the rifle, let it fall to the dirt, raised her hands. The fighters moved in fast, one kicking her legs out from under her, slamming her face first into the ground. Zip ties bit into her wrists, pulled tight enough to cut off circulation. Rough hands yanked her upright, shoved her forward. Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, she heard Cordero's voice over the radio, tinny and distant. "Watcher 1, status?" She couldn't answer. The radio was still clipped to her vest, but her hands were bound behind her back. "Watcher 1, respond!" One of the fighters ripped the radio off her vest and threw it into the dirt, crushing it under his boot. They dragged her toward the compound, past the burning carrier, past the bodies of fighters she'd killed. Her vision swam. Her ribs felt like broken glass grinding against each other with every breath. Somewhere in the distance, she heard helicopter rotors. The extraction bird coming in hot. But it was coming for the assault team, not for her. They hauled her through the compound gate and threw her into a small concrete room. No windows, one door, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The door slammed shut. She heard a lock engage. Mara lay on the cold floor, breathing hard, testing her bonds. The zip ties were industrial strength, tight enough that her fingers were already going numb. She tried pulling against them anyway, twisting, straining, nothing. They didn't budge. She forced herself to think, to assess. Captured, disarmed, injured, alone. The assault team had the intel officer. They'd make it to the extraction point. The mission would succeed. But she wouldn't be on that helicopter. Mara closed her eyes and tried to slow her breathing, tried to find the quiet place her father taught her. It didn't come. The door opened. 3 men entered. 2 were fighters she didn't recognize, both armed, both watching her with cold professionalism. The third was different. Older, maybe 50, with gray in his beard and scars on his hands. He wore civilian clothes but moved like military. His eyes were the color of dirty ice. He crouched beside her, studying her face like she was an interesting insect. Second Lieutenant Mara Keene. His English was accented but fluent. United States Army, designated marksman, overwatch position. Mara said nothing. He smiled. "You don't have to confirm. We already know. Found your rifle on Raven Ridge. Beautiful weapon. You take good care of your equipment." Still nothing. "You cost me 12 men tonight and an armored vehicle." His tone was conversational, almost friendly. "That vehicle was expensive, very expensive." Mara met his eyes, kept her face blank. The man stood, walked to the door, then turned back. "My name is Mikhail Volkov. I used to train Spetsnaz snipers before I found more profitable work, so I understand what you did tonight. The distance, the wind, the pressure." He nodded slowly. "Impressive. Truly." He gestured to one of the guards. "Bring her." They hauled Mara to her feet, ribs screaming, and shoved her out the door into the night air. The compound was chaos, fires still burning, wounded being treated, fighters shouting orders. Volkov led them across the courtyard to the 2-story headquarters building. Inside, up a narrow staircase, into a room that looked like it used to be an office. Desk, chairs, maps on the wall. A laptop sat open on the desk, screen glowing. They forced Mara into a chair. One guard stood at the door. The other positioned himself behind her. Volkov sat on the edge of the desk, arms crossed. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about your unit. Numbers, capabilities, equipment, next operation. And then you're going to tell me about the intelligence officer your team extracted tonight. What does he know? What did he tell you?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Name, rank, serial number." Volkov sighed. "I was afraid you'd say that." He stood, walked behind her. "I don't enjoy this part, but I'm very good at it." He nodded to the guard behind her. The guard grabbed Mara's zip-tied wrists and yanked upward, levering her arms at a brutal angle. Pain exploded through her shoulders, white-hot and total. She bit down on a scream, turning it into a strangled grunt. "Start with something easy. Volkov said. How many operators in your unit? Mara's vision blurred. She focused on breathing. In, out. Keen, Mara. Second Lieutenant. Service number 743. The guard yanked harder. Something in her left shoulder made a wet popping sound. This time, she couldn't stop the scream. Volkov waited until it subsided. We can do this for hours, or you can talk, and I can make it stop. Mara's head dropped forward, hair falling across her face. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. She needed time. Needed to think. 7439128. Volkov leaned closer. What? My service number. 74339. He backhanded her across the face. Her head snapped sideways, blood filling her mouth from a split lip. You think you're brave? Volkov's voice was colder now. You think this makes you a hero? Your team left you. They're already gone. Nobody's coming back. He walked to the window, looking out at the compound. You know what I think? I think you're scared. I think you're trying to buy time because you think someone will rescue you. He turned back. They won't. Mara spat blood onto the floor, looked up at him through strands of hair, and for the first time she smiled. You talk a lot for someone who's supposed to be good at this. Volkov's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He gestured to the guard again. This time the pain was different, electric, searing, running from her shoulders down her spine. She heard herself screaming distantly, like it was happening to someone else. When it stopped, she was lying on the floor. The chair had tipped over. Her vision was doubled, tripled. The room spun. Volkov's voice came from very far away. Get her up. We'll continue in an hour. Let her think about it. Hands grabbed her, hauled her upright. The world tilted sickeningly. They dragged her out of the room, down the stairs, back across the courtyard. The small concrete room again. They dumped her on the floor and left. Mara lay there, trying to breathe through the pain, trying to think through the fog in her head. Her left shoulder was definitely dislocated. Her ribs were either broken or badly bruised. Her wrists were numb, circulation cut off. She was in bad shape, getting worse. But she was alive, and as long as she was alive, she could still fight. Mara rolled onto her side, testing her range of motion. Agony lanced through her shoulder, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. Sat up, looked around the room. Bare concrete walls, metal door, single light bulb. Nothing useful, except her eyes caught on her boots. Standard issue combat boots, 8-inch height, reinforced toe. And tucked into the right boot, hidden beneath the laces and tongue, was something the guards hadn't found. A small carbon fiber blade, 3 inches long, razor sharp. Emergency backup. She'd carried it on every deployment, sewn into a custom sheath inside the boot. Mara's heart rate kicked up. She forced herself to stay calm, to move slowly. She worked her bound hands down toward her boots, shoulders screaming protest, zip ties cutting deeper into her wrists. It took almost 5 minutes of agonizing contortion to get her fingers close enough to reach the boot tongue. She felt the blade's handle, gripped it with numb fingers, pulled it free, almost dropped it, caught it at the last second. Now came the hard part. She maneuvered the blade between her hands, positioning the edge against the zip tie. Started sawing. The angle was wrong, her grip weak, progress maddeningly slow. She kept going. Outside, voices shouted orders. Vehicle engines started. The compound was reorganizing, preparing for a potential counterattack. Mara sawed faster, ignoring the burning in her shoulders, the screaming in her ribs. The zip tie began to fray, strand by strand, fiber by fiber. 5 minutes. 10. The tie gave way. Mara's hands came free. Circulation rushed back into her fingers, bringing pins and needles that felt like fire ants. She flexed her hands, working feeling back into them, then carefully reached up and pushed her dislocated shoulder against the wall. This was going to hurt. She took 3 deep breaths, counted to 3, and slammed her shoulder into the concrete. The joint popped back into place with a sound like breaking wood. Pain whited out her vision for a solid 10 seconds. When it cleared, she was on her knees, gasping, tears streaming down her face, but her shoulder was back in the socket. Mara climbed to her feet, swaying, tested her weight. She could move, barely. She still had the blade, and now she had her hands. That made her dangerous again. She moved to the door, pressed her ear against it, heard footsteps outside, regular and rhythmic. A guard posted nearby. Mara looked up at the light bulb. Single fixture, exposed wiring where it connected to the ceiling. Not ideal, but workable. She unscrewed the bulb carefully, plunging the room into darkness. Then she positioned herself beside the door and started screaming. "Help! Someone help! I can't breathe!" The footsteps outside stopped. A pause. Then the lock rattled. The door opened, spilling light into the room. A guard stepped in, rifle up, scanning the darkness. Mara moved. She came from the side, blade leading, and drove it into the soft tissue below his jaw, angling upward. He tried to scream but only managed a wet gurgle. His rifle clattered to the floor. Mara caught him as he fell, lowering him quietly to the ground. Her ribs screamed, her shoulder throbbed, but she didn't stop. She grabbed his rifle. Another AK-74, checked the magazine. Full. 30 rounds. She took his spare magazines, his radio, his sidearm. Then she dragged his body into the room and closed the door. Mara stood in the corridor, breathing hard, listening. No alarms, no shouts. The guard's death had been silent. She was armed again. Mobile again. But she was still deep inside enemy territory, injured, alone, with an entire compound of hostile fighters between her and freedom. Through a nearby window, she could see the canyon walls rising in the darkness. Somewhere out there was the rally point. Somewhere out there was the exfiltration route. All she had to do was cross 300 meters of open ground, evade thermal optics and patrol teams, and make it to terrain that would take her 3 hours to navigate in perfect health. In her current state, it might as well have been the moon. Mara checked the rifle's action, thumbed the selector to semi-auto, took a long, slow breath. Her father's voice whispered one last time, "Sometimes you don't get to choose the fight, kiddo, but you always get to choose how you fight it." She moved toward the window, toward the canyon, toward the impossible odds waiting in the darkness. And Second Lieutenant Mara Keene, who'd been called dead weight in diversity hire and not good enough, decided that if she was going to die tonight, she'd die on her feet, moving forward with a rifle in her hands and fight left in her heart. The night swallowed her whole, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled as if the desert itself was holding its breath to see what happened next. The window was narrow, barely wide enough for her shoulders, but Mara didn't hesitate. She slung the AK-74 across her back, gripped the frame with both hands, and hauled herself through into the night air. The landing came hard, 10 feet down onto packed earth that jarred her spine and sent fresh agony screaming through her ribs. She rolled with the impact, came up in a crouch, weapon ready. The compound sprawled around her in pools of light and shadow. Generators hummed, voices called out in Russian and Arabic, coordinating patrols. The main gate was lit up like a prison yard. 3 guards visible from her position, scanning outward for threats that might come from beyond the wire. They weren't looking inward. Nobody expected the prisoner to escape. Mara stayed low, moving along the building's shadow line toward the western perimeter. Her shoulder throbbed with each movement. Her ribs felt like they were grinding together, but she pushed through it. Pain was just information. It told her she was alive, still capable of moving. She made it 20 meters before the radio on her belt crackled to life. A voice barked in Russian, sharp and urgent. She didn't speak the language, but the tone was universal. Someone had found the dead guard. Seconds later, alarms started wailing. The compound erupted. Floodlights blazed to full brightness. Fighters poured out of buildings, weapons up, voices shouting. Someone fired a flare into the sky, brilliant magnesium white, turning night into artificial day. Mara ran. She sprinted toward the perimeter wall, boots pounding dirt, lungs burning. 30 meters, 20. Gunfire erupted behind her, hasty, undisciplined, rounds snapping past her head and kicking up dirt at her feet. The wall was 8 feet of stacked concrete blocks topped with razor wire. No time for careful climbing. Mara hit it at full speed, jumped, caught the top edge with both hands. The razor wire bit deep into her palms, blood running hot and slicked down her wrists, but she pulled herself up and over, dropping hard on the far side. She landed in a crouch, rolled, came up running. The desert opened up before her, dark, vast, unforgiving. The canyon walls rose like black teeth against the star field, 1,000 places to hide and 1,000 places to die. Mara angled northwest toward the rally point, toward terrain she'd studied but never walked. Behind her, the compound was a hornet's nest, voices shouting, vehicles starting, searchlights sweeping the desert. They'd be coming, fast and angry and equipped with thermal optics that would light her up like a beacon in the darkness. She needed distance. She needed cover. She needed a miracle. What she got was worse terrain. The ground turned treacherous, loose shale that shifted under every step, hidden gullies that appeared without warning, thorny scrub that grabbed at her clothing and cut exposed skin. Her injured body protested every movement, muscles trembling with exhaustion, ribs stabbing with each gasping breath. She'd covered maybe 400 meters when she heard the vehicles. Mara dropped flat behind a cluster of rocks and looked back. 3 technical trucks racing out of the compound, searchlights mounted, fighters standing in the beds with rifles ready. They spread out in a search pattern, methodical and professional. One truck was heading straight toward her position. Mara pressed herself against the rocks, trying to control her breathing, trying to think. The AK-74 had 30 rounds. Against 3 trucks full of fighters, that wasn't enough. Not even close. She needed to change the equation. Her eyes caught on something 50 meters to her right, a narrow ravine cutting into the canyon wall, barely visible in the darkness. Natural cover, defensible position. The truck's engine grew louder, searchlight sweeping back and forth across the desert floor. Mara waited until the light passed her position, then broke cover and sprinted for the ravine. Her boots slipped on loose rock. Her shoulder screamed, but she didn't slow down. 20 meters. 10. The searchlight swung back, catching her in its beam. Voices shouted. The truck accelerated, engine roaring. Mara dove into the ravine just as gunfire erupted, rounds sparking off rocks where she'd been standing half a second earlier. She scrambled deeper into the natural trench, using the walls for cover, moving as fast as her broken body would allow. The ravine twisted and narrowed, forcing her to turn sideways to squeeze through in places. Behind her, she heard the truck skid to a stop, doors slamming, boots hitting ground. They were coming on foot. Mara found a choke point, a section where the ravine narrowed to barely 3 feet across, with waist-high rocks on either side. Perfect ambush position. She dropped to one knee, shouldered the AK-74, and waited. The first fighter appeared 15 seconds later, moving fast and confident, rifle up but not aimed. He never saw her. Mara fired twice. Center mass. He went down. The second fighter was smarter, hanging back, using cover, but he exposed himself for half a second to check on his partner. One shot, headshot, down. The third fighter didn't come. Smart. He knew someone was waiting, knew rushing in meant death. Silence fell over the ravine, broken only by the distant sound of the other vehicles searching, engines growling like mechanical predators. Mara's radio crackled. Volkov's voice, calm and cold. "Lieutenant Keene, I'm impressed, truly. But you're not going to make it. We have thermal optics, fresh troops, and you're bleeding. We can track you all night." She didn't respond, didn't waste energy on words that wouldn't change anything. "Come back now, and I'll make it quick," Volkov continued. "Keep running, and when we catch you, and we will catch you, I'll make it last days." Mara ejected the magazine, checked the count. 26 rounds left. Not enough for a sustained fight. She looted the dead fighters quickly, efficiently, found 2 spare magazines, a fragmentation grenade, and a suppressed Makarov pistol. Better. Movement caught her eye, thermal imaging goggles on one of the bodies. She grabbed them, pulled them on. The world turned into shades of heat. Warm rocks glowed dull orange. The dead bodies blazed white-hot. And in the distance, she could see the heat signatures of the searching fighters, spread out across the desert in a coordinated sweep pattern. They were boxing her in, cutting off escape routes. Professional tactics. Mara studied the terrain through the thermal optics, looking for anything she could use. The canyon system was a maze of natural features, ravines, caves, dead ends, and one narrow passage that might lead to higher ground. Might. No guarantees. But staying here meant dying here. She moved deeper into the ravine, following the natural contours, weapon ready. The passage narrowed further, forcing her to crawl in places. Jagged rock scraping her back. Her ribs protested every movement, pain building to the point where she had to stop and breathe through it, vision graying at the edges. Keep moving. Just keep moving. The ravine opened into a small cave, maybe 12 feet deep, 6 feet high, carved by ancient water flow. Dead end. Mara's heart sank. She'd bet wrong. Trapped herself. Then she noticed the gap. High up on the cave wall, partially hidden by shadow, was a crack in the rock. Narrow, steep, maybe wide enough to climb. She couldn't see where it led, but staying in the cave meant certain death. The fighters would sweep through, find her, end this. Mara slung the rifle, grabbed the rough stone, and started climbing. Every pull sent lightning through her injured shoulder. Her palms were slick with blood from the razor wire, making every grip uncertain. Twice she almost fell, fingers slipping on smooth stone, legs scrabbling for purchase. She made it 10 feet up when she heard voices below, boots on stone, flashlight sweeping the ravine. Mara froze, pressed flat against the rock face, trying to become invisible. Her breathing sounded deafening in her own ears. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain they'd hear it. A flashlight beam swept the cave below, paused, moved on. Pusto, a voice called out. Empty. The footsteps moved away. Mara didn't move for a full minute, lungs screaming for air, muscles trembling with the strain of holding position. When she was certain they'd gone, she continued climbing. The crack widened as she ascended, becoming a natural chimney between two rock faces. She braced herself against both sides, using opposing pressure to work her way upward, inch by agonizing inch. 20 feet, 30. Her strength was failing, arms shaking, vision swimming, and then her hand reached up and found empty air. The top. Mara hauled herself over the edge and collapsed onto flat stone, gasping, every muscle screaming. For a long moment, she just lay there, staring at the stars, wondering if she'd passed out and this was a dream. She sat up slowly, taking stock. She was on a natural ledge about 60 feet above the canyon floor, hidden from below by the angle of the rock face. The ledge extended maybe 20 feet in each direction before ending in sheer drops. But it gave her elevation, line of sight, a chance. Through the thermal goggles, she could see the search pattern continuing below. The fighters were thorough, checking every crevice, every shadow. They'd find the cave eventually, figure out she'd climbed, but by then, she'd be gone. Mara studied the terrain ahead. The ledge connected to a ridge system that ran roughly north-northwest, the right direction. It was exposed, dangerous. One wrong step meant falling to her death. But it was a path. She started moving, placing each step carefully, testing every handhold. The ridge was barely 3 feet wide in places, loose rocks skittering away into darkness whenever she disturbed it. Don't look down. Just keep moving forward. She'd covered maybe 200 meters when she heard the helicopter. The sound came from the east, rotor blades cutting through the night, growing louder. Searchlights stabbed down from the sky, sweeping the canyon in methodical patterns. They'd brought in air support. Mara pressed herself into a shallow depression in the rock face, trying to minimize her thermal signature. The helicopter passed overhead, searchlight missing her by 30 feet, and continued sweeping south. She waited until the sound faded, then kept moving. The ridge descended gradually, leading her down toward the canyon floor at a more manageable angle. She could see the rally point now through the thermal goggles, a cluster of rocks at the base of a larger cliff face, maybe 800 meters northeast. Close. So close. That's when she heard the radio chatter spike, urgent, coordinated. They'd found her trail. Figured out she'd gone up instead of deeper into the ravine. Vehicles converged on her position, headlights cutting through the darkness. The helicopter banked hard, coming back around. Mara broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed. Her boots pounded stone, lungs burning, ribs grinding together. The ridge was ending, dropping down to a boulder field that offered cover but slowed movement. Behind her, muzzle flashes lit up the night. Rounds cracked past her head, sparked off rocks. The helicopter searchlight found her, locked on, turning her into a spotlight target. She dove behind a boulder as heavy machine gun fire from the helicopter tore chunks out of the stone. Fragments stung her face, dust filled her lungs. Trapped. Again. With nowhere to run and not enough ammunition to fight, Mara's hand found the fragmentation grenade on her belt. One grenade. Against a helicopter and 3 trucks full of fighters. She was about to pull the pin, about to make one last desperate stand, when a voice cut through her radio. Different frequency. American accent. Urgent and clear. Watcher 1, this is Falcon 3-6. We have visual on your position. Stay down. Mara's breath caught. She keyed the radio with trembling fingers. Falcon 3-6, Watcher 1, how? Intel officer you extracted gave us your last known position. We came back for you. Now stay down and mark your position. Mara pulled a chem light from her vest, cracked it, and threw it 10 feet away from her hiding spot. Green glow lit up the rocks. Visual on marker, the voice confirmed. Danger close in 3, 2, 1. The night exploded. An AGM-114. Hellfire missile screamed out of the darkness and slammed into the nearest technical truck. The explosion was enormous, vehicle disintegrating in a ball of fire and shrapnel. The second truck tried to evade, but a second missile found it, turning it into twisted, burning metal. The helicopter pilot tried to climb, tried to run, but an AH-64 Apache gunship materialized out of the darkness like an avenging angel, 30-millimeter chain gun roaring. Tracers walked across the sky, found the enemy helicopter, and tore it apart. It spun, trailing fire, and slammed into the canyon wall in a cascade of sparks and debris. The third technical truck was already retreating, racing back toward the compound at full speed. The Apache let it go. Silence fell over the canyon, broken only by the crackling of fires and the settling of debris. Watcher 1, you still with us? Mara keyed the radio, voice hoarse. Still here. Good, because the commander's going to want to have words with you about freelancing. A pause. But between you and me, that was one hell of a performance. How far to extract? Rally point is 500 meters northeast. Ground team's waiting. Can you move? Mara pushed herself upright, every part of her body protesting. I can move. Then move fast. That compound just lit up like Christmas. They're organizing a major response. Mara started toward the rally point, forcing her legs to work, forcing her body to keep going despite everything. The boulder field was treacherous in the darkness, but she navigated it with grim determination, counting steps, measuring breaths. 300 meters. 200. She could see them now. 4 figures in tactical gear, weapons ready, positioned in defensive positions around a cluster of rocks. 100 meters. A figure stepped forward, rifle lowered. Even at this distance, even through the pain and exhaustion, she recognized the silhouette. Rollins. Mara covered the last 50 meters and stopped 10 feet away from the team. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Rollins lowered his weapon completely and nodded once. Lieutenant? His voice was different. No contempt, no dismissal, just respect. Corporal. Cordero stepped forward, his face unreadable in the darkness. You were supposed to stay on overwatch. Yes, sir. You left your position, engaged armor with an RPG at close range, got yourself captured, killed 2 guards, escaped custody, evaded pursuit, and somehow didn't die. He paused. That about cover it? Yes, sir. Cordero stared at her for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. Next time, follow orders. Yes, sir. But that shit with the fuel tank shot, that was textbook. He keyed his radio. Falcon 3-6, we have Watcher 1, ready for extract. Copy. Birds inbound, 2 minutes. The team formed a defensive perimeter, weapons outward. Mara stood in the center, swaying slightly, every ounce of adrenaline draining away and leaving only exhaustion behind. Cross appeared at her side, medkit already open. Sit down before you fall down. Mara obeyed, legs folding under her. Cross started working immediately, checking vitals, examining injuries, cleaning wounds. Dislocated shoulder, broken or bruised ribs, lacerations on both hands, possible concussion. Cross shook her head. You should be dead. I know. Seriously, the odds of everything that just happened working out? Astronomical. Mara didn't respond. She was watching Rollins, who stood at the perimeter scanning the darkness. As if feeling her eyes on him, he glanced back. Their eyes met. He nodded again. A small gesture, but it said everything that needed saying. She nodded back. The helicopters appeared 2 minutes later, 2 Blackhawks, flying low and fast, door guns manned and ready. They flared hard, wheels barely touching down before the crew chiefs were waving them aboard. The team moved as one, Cross helping Mara to her feet, half carrying her to the nearest bird. They hauled her inside and she collapsed onto the bench seat, strapping in with trembling hands. Vance was there, leg wrapped in bloody bandages, face pale but alive. He grinned when he saw her. "Heard you went full action hero." Something like that. The helicopter lifted off, nose dipping forward as it accelerated away from the canyon. Through the open door, Mara watched the compound recede into the distance. Fires still burning, emergency lights flashing. Volkov was down there somewhere, watching his operation fall apart, watching his prize prisoner disappear into the night. She hoped he was furious. Cordero sat across from her, studying her face. "Intel officer says you saved his life. Says if you hadn't taken out that machine gun nest, they'd have cut him down in the courtyard." "Just doing my job, sir." "Your job was Overwatch. You went way beyond that." He leaned forward. "What you did tonight, the shots, the armor kill, the escape, that's going in my report. Every detail." Mara met his eyes. "And the part where I disobeyed orders?" "What part was that?" Cordero's expression didn't change. "My report says you adapted to changing battlefield conditions and showed exceptional tactical flexibility under extreme pressure." Rollins, sitting nearby, made a sound that might have been a laugh. The flight back to base took 40 minutes. Mara spent most of it drifting in and out of consciousness, cross-monitoring her vitals, occasionally forcing her to drink water. The pain was constant now, a full-body ache that made thinking difficult. But they were alive, all of them, including the intel officer, who sat wrapped in a blanket, looking shell-shocked but intact. The helicopter touched down at Outpost Redhaven just as dawn broke over the eastern mountains, turning the sky from black to deep purple to burning orange. Mara watched the sunrise through the door, thinking about her father, about all the mornings he'd watched through a scope while waiting for the perfect shot. "I did it, Dad. I proved I belonged." Medical was waiting, stretchers, triage teams, the whole apparatus. They tried to put Mara on a stretcher, but she waved them off, insisting on walking. It was stupid and prideful and probably made her injuries worse, but she needed to walk off that helicopter on her own 2 feet, needed everyone to see her do it. The base was buzzing with activity. Word had spread about the mission, about the extraction, about the second lieutenant who'd apparently lost her mind and decided to fight an entire compound by herself. Mara made it 20 feet from the helicopter before her legs finally gave out. Cross caught her before she hit the ground. "Okay, hero, stretcher time." Mara didn't argue. She let them load her onto the stretcher, let them carry her to the medical tent, let the exhaustion finally claim her. Her last conscious thought before darkness took her was of Rawlins's nod, of Cordero's almost smile, of the way Cross had called her hero without a trace of irony. They'd looked down on her once. Now they looked at her differently. And somewhere in that difference, Mara Keene, second lieutenant, designated marksman, dead weight, had become something else entirely. Someone who'd earned her place not with words or politics or favors, but with blood and bullets and the kind of courage that only shows up when everything's on the line, and the only choice left is to move forward or die trying. The medical tent's lights blazed white and sterile above her as consciousness faded, and in that fading moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because the fight was over. There would always be another fight, another mission, another moment where she'd have to prove herself all over again, but because she knew, finally and completely, that when that moment came, she'd be ready. And so would they. Mara woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of a heart monitor. The medical tent's canvas ceiling stretched above her, stained yellow by sunlight filtering through. Her mouth tasted like copper and sand. Every part of her body felt wrapped in gauze and regret. She tried to sit up. Her ribs immediately vetoed that idea with a sharp spike of pain that made her vision blur. "Easy." Cross's voice came from somewhere to her left. "You've got 3 cracked ribs, first-degree burns on both palms, that shoulder's gonna hurt for weeks, and you're concussed, so maybe don't try parkour just yet." Mara turned her head slowly. Cross sat in a folding chair beside the bed, tablet in hand, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "How long was I out?" 14 hours. It's 1600 local time." Cross set down the tablet. "You've had visitors. Cordero came by twice. Rollins brought you coffee, which was weird. Intel officer wanted to thank you personally, but I told him you weren't receiving. Vance? Surgery went fine. Arteries repaired, no permanent damage. He'll be stateside in a week." Cross leaned forward. "How you feeling? And don't say fine because I can read your vitals." Mara considered lying anyway, then decided against it. Like I got hit by a truck. Then the truck backed up and hit me again. Accurate. Cross stood, checked the IV line, made a note on the chart. You're on pain meds, antibiotics, and enough fluids to float a battleship. Doc says you'll be cleared for light duty in 72 hours, full duty in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? You're lucky it's not 2 months. Cross's voice hardened. What you did? Running into enemy fire, engaging armor with no support, getting captured and escaping, that's not normal operator behavior. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and I haven't decided which yet. Mara met her eyes. Did the mission succeed? You know it did. Then it was brave. Cross almost smiled. Cordero wants to see you, soon as you're vertical. I'm vertical now. You're horizontal and medicated. There's a difference. Cross moved toward the tent flap, then paused. For what it's worth. What you did out there. I've been in combat medicine for 8 years. I've seen a lot of soldiers do a lot of things, but I've never seen anyone fight that hard to get back to their team. She held Mara's gaze. You earned something last night. Don't waste it. She left before Mara could respond. Mara lay still, staring at the ceiling, processing. Her body hurt, her pride hurt worse, because underneath the pain and exhaustion was a question she couldn't ignore. Had she really earned respect, or had she just gotten lucky? The tent flap opened again. This time it was a corpsman, young, nervous, carrying a food tray. Ma'am, brought you dinner, Doc's orders. The tray held mystery meat, rice, vegetables that had seen better days, and coffee that smelled like it had been brewed sometime last week. It looked like heaven. Thanks. There's also this. He handed her a folded piece of paper. Major Cordero said to give it to you when you woke up. Mara unfolded the note. Cordero's handwriting, neat and precise. Debrief at 1800 hours. Conference room, main building. Be there. She checked the wall clock. 16:15 hours. That gave her 45 minutes to get vertical, get dressed, and get her head straight. The corpsman hovered uncertainly. Ma'am, do you need anything else? Yeah, help me sit up. He looked dubious but complied, supporting her back as she slowly, painfully, maneuvered herself into a sitting position. The room spun briefly, then settled. Her ribs screamed. She ignored them. Thanks. I got it from here. Ma'am, the doctor said. I know what the doctor said. But I've got a meeting in 45 minutes and I'm not showing up on a stretcher. The corpsman looked like he wanted to argue, thought better of it, and left. Mara ate mechanically, forcing down food her stomach didn't want but her body needed. The coffee was as bad as it smelled, but the caffeine helped push back the fog in her head. Getting dressed took 20 minutes and nearly broke her. Her uniform had been cleaned but still showed signs of what she'd been through. Scorch marks, dried blood on the sleeves, a tear across the shoulder from the razor wire. Her hands shook as she buttoned the shirt, pain making fine motor control difficult. The mirror mounted on the tent pole showed someone she barely recognized. Face bruised, split lip, eyes ringed with exhaustion. She looked like she'd gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight boxer and lost. But she was standing. That counted for something. At 17:55 hours, Mara walked out of the medical tent into the late afternoon heat. The base was in full operational mode, soldiers moving with purpose, vehicles being serviced, the constant background hum of generators and radio chatter. A few people glanced her way. Some nodded. One sergeant she didn't know gave her a thumbs up. Word had definitely spread. The main building was a prefab structure at the center of the outpost, housing command and control, communications, and briefing rooms. Mara climbed the 3 steps to the entrance, each one a small victory over her protesting body, and pushed through the door. Air conditioning hit her like a blessing. The temperature dropped 20 degrees, sweat evaporating instantly. A staff sergeant behind a desk looked up. Lieutenant Keene? That's me. Conference room's down the hall, second door on the left. Major's waiting. Mara found the room easily, took a breath, knocked. Come. She entered. The conference room was small and utilitarian. 1 table, 8 chairs, a wall-mounted screen showing a freeze frame of satellite imagery. Cordero sat at the head of the table, reading a report on a tablet. He didn't look up immediately. Close the door. Sit. Mara obeyed, taking the chair directly across from him. The movement sent fresh pain through her ribs. She kept her face neutral. Cordero set down the tablet and studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. "How you feeling?" "Ready for duty, sir." "I didn't ask if you were ready. I asked how you're feeling." Mara hesitated. "Like I got hit by a truck." "That's what Cross said you'd say." Cordero leaned back in his chair. "I've got reports from 6 different sources about what happened last night. Team reports, air support logs, signals intelligence, even satellite imagery from when you were on that ridge." He tapped the tablet. "Want to know what they all say?" "Sir?" "That you're either the luckiest soldier I've ever seen or the most skilled, possibly both." He leaned forward. 12 shots fired from Overwatch, 12 hits, 0 misses, ranges from 1,100 to 1,300 meters in variable wind under combat stress. That's not luck. Mara said nothing. Then there's the fuel tank shot. Moving target, 1,200 meters, dinner plate-sized target. My best shooters wouldn't take that shot. You made it. He paused. How? Training, sir? And what? She met his eyes. My father was a police sharpshooter. He started training me when I was 12. Taught me everything: breathing, trigger control, wind reading, range estimation. We'd spend weekends in the woods shooting at targets he'd set up at ridiculous distances. He said if I could learn to shoot under pressure, everything else would be easier. He taught you well. He died when I was 16, heart attack. I kept training on my own. Joined ROTC in college, qualified expert on every weapon system they'd let me touch. But when I commissioned... She stopped. When you commissioned, people looked at you and saw demographics, not capability. Yes, sir. Cordero was quiet for a moment. You know what I saw in your personnel file when they assigned you to my unit? Sir? Top marks in marksmanship, excellent tactical thinking, strong physical fitness scores, and a note from your previous CO saying you were adequate for admin roles but not recommended for combat operations. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. That CO is a jackass, and he's wrong. Mara felt something loosen in her chest. What you did last night, Cordero continued, took skill, courage, and tactical flexibility. The armored carrier engagement alone is going into the training manual. But, his voice hardened, you also disobeyed orders. You left your designated position without authorization. You engaged in close combat when your role was Overwatch, and you got yourself captured, which could have compromised the entire operation. Yes, sir. So here's where we are. I can write this up as insubordination and have you reassigned to counting socks at some supply depot. Or I can write it up as exceptional performance under unique circumstances and recommend you for decoration. He studied her. Which would you prefer? It was a trap. Had to be. Whatever you think is appropriate, sir. Wrong answer. Cordero stood, walked to the window, looked out at the base. I don't want soldiers who just follow orders blindly. I want soldiers who can think, who can adapt, who can make hard calls when communications go down and the situation goes sideways. He turned back. But I also need soldiers who understand that there's a difference between tactical flexibility and reckless disregard for protocol. Understood, sir. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've got a chip on your shoulder the size of Montana. You're so busy trying to prove you belong that you're taking unnecessary risks. That gets people killed. Mara's jaw tightened. With respect, sir, everything I did last night was necessary. The team was pinned. The carrier would have killed them. Someone had to... Someone. Not necessarily you. Cordero moved back to the table, planted both hands on it, leaned in. You're a designated marksman, one of the best I've seen, but you're not infantry, you're not explosives, and you're definitely not a one-woman army. He paused. Last night worked out. Next time might not. And I won't lose a skilled operator because she's got something to prove. The words hit harder than Mara expected. She stared at the table, processing. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted. You're right. I do have something to prove. Because every unit I've been in, every assignment I've taken, someone's been waiting for me to fail. Waiting to say, see, we told you she couldn't handle it. So yeah, maybe I take risks. Maybe I push harder than I should. But it's because the moment I stop proving myself, the moment I show weakness, that's when they win. Who wins? Everyone who thinks I don't belong here. Cordero was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. You know what the team calls you now? Mara looked up, surprised. Sir? Iron Wolf. Started with Rollins, spread from there. You know why? She shook her head. Because wolves are smart, adaptable, and dangerous. And iron doesn't break. He straightened. You've proved yourself, Keen. Mission's over. You can stop fighting now. Can I? The words came out sharper than she intended. Because I guarantee when we get back stateside, someone's going to look at my report and say I got lucky. Say the mission succeeded despite me, not because of me. Say I was reckless and emotional, and let them say it. Cordero's voice cut through her building anger like a knife. Because I'm the one writing the report, and my report says Second Lieutenant Mara Keen performed with exceptional skill and courage under extreme conditions. It says she's recommended for the Bronze Star with Valor device. And it says any unit would be lucky to have her. Mara stared at him, speechless. Bronze Star's going to take time to process, paperwork, review boards, all that bureaucratic nonsense. But it's going through. I'll make sure of it. He picked up his tablet again. You're dismissed. Get some rest. Report back to duty when medical clears you. Mara stood slowly, ribs protesting. Sir, thank you. Don't thank me. You earned it. He glanced up one more time. And Keen? Next time you decide to go rogue and fight an entire compound by yourself, give me a heads up first. My heart can't take too many more nights like that. For the first time in days, Mara smiled. Yes, sir. She left the conference room, walked down the hall, and made it outside before the shaking started. Adrenaline dump, delayed reaction, emotional overload, she wasn't sure which. Her hands trembled, her breath came in short gasps, and she had to lean against the building wall to stay upright. Bronze Star. Recommended for decoration, exceptional skill and courage. The words played on repeat in her head, and she couldn't quite believe they were real. You okay, Lieutenant? Mara looked up. Rollins stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Yeah, just needed some air. He nodded, didn't press. They stood in silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun painting long shadows across the base. Look, Rollins said finally, what I said before the mission, about confidence and bullets, and he stopped, jaw working. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Mara straightened, surprised. Corporal, let me finish. He met her eyes. I've been doing this for 12 years, seen a lot of people come through, some good, some bad, most somewhere in between, and I learned early to trust my gut about who could handle the pressure and who'd fold. He paused. My gut was wrong about you. Way wrong. Rollins, you don't have to... Yeah, I do, because what you did out there, the shots, the tactics, coming back from capture, that's the kind of thing legends are made of. And I almost missed seeing it because I was too busy being a judgmental asshole. He extended his hand. You're solid, Lieutenant. Best I've seen. Mara took his hand, shook it. His grip was firm, honest. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep being you. We need more operators like that. He released her hand, started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and the coffee I brought? Cross said you were sleeping, but I left it anyway. Probably cold by now, but the thought counts, right? He walked off before she could respond. Mara stood there, processing. The man who'd called her dead weight had just apologized, had just called her the best he'd seen. She wasn't sure which felt more surreal, the Bronze Star recommendation or this. The next 3 days passed in a blur of recovery and routine. Medical checks every 6 hours, physical therapy for her shoulder, paperwork documenting the mission, the injuries, the equipment lost and expended. Mara spent most of it in a fog of pain medication and exhaustion, but slowly, incrementally, she started feeling human again. On the 4th day, Cross cleared her for light duty. Nothing strenuous, Cross warned. No lifting over 10 pounds, no running, no combat operations. You're basically on desk work until your ribs heal. How long? 4 to 6 weeks. And before you ask, no, you can't speed it up by ignoring my instructions and hurting yourself again. That just resets the clock. Mara returned to her quarters, a small room she shared with another female officer who was currently deployed elsewhere, and found a box waiting on her bunk. Inside, her rifle. The Mk-22 PSR, cleaned, oiled, and cased. A note attached in Cordero's handwriting, recovered from Raven Ridge, still zeroed. Don't make me regret giving this back. Mara ran her fingers along the case, feeling the familiar contours. This rifle had saved lives, had proved her worth, had become an extension of herself in ways that were hard to explain. She set it carefully in her footlocker and locked it. That evening, the team gathered for an informal debrief. No officers, no official record, just the operators who'd been there, sharing a meal and talking through what happened. It was tradition after difficult missions, a way to process trauma and build unit cohesion. Mara almost didn't go. Wasn't sure she'd be welcome, but Rawlins appeared at her door at 1800 hours and said, "You coming or what?" in a tone that didn't really allow for refusal. The gathering was in one of the recreation tents, 8 people, including Vance on crutches, the intel officer they'd extracted, and the Apache pilot who'd provided fire support. Someone had scrounged up actual hot food from somewhere. Beer wasn't officially allowed, but a few cans appeared anyway, passed around discreetly. Mara took a seat near the edge of the group, still feeling like an outsider. Vance raised a can in her direction. "To the Iron Wolf, for carrying this team's ass when we needed it most." The group echoed the toast. "Iron Wolf." Mara felt heat rise in her face. "I just did my job." "No," the intel officer said quietly. He was thin, pale, with eyes that had seen too much. "You did more than that. When they had me in that compound, when I thought I wasn't getting out, you gave me hope. Every shot you made, every threat you eliminated, I could see it happening, could see someone fighting for me." His voice cracked. "I have a wife. 2 kids. I get to see them again because of you." Mara didn't know what to say to that. The conversation moved on. War stories, dark humor, the kind of bonding that happens when people have faced death together and survived. Mara mostly listened, occasionally contributing when someone asked her a direct question. But she noticed something. The way they included her in the conversation, the way they laughed at her jokes, the way nobody questioned whether she deserved to be there. She'd earned her place. Finally, completely, without asterisks or qualifications. Later, after most people had drifted away, Rawlins sat down beside her. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "That breathing technique you use, 4 in, hold, 6 out. I've seen you do it under pressure. Where'd you learn that?" "My father taught me. Said it was the key to shooting well. Control your breathing, control your heart rate, control the shot." "Smart man." "He was." Rawlins nodded slowly. "My dad was career Army. Died in Iraq when I was 19. He taught me that fear's not the enemy. Panic is. Fear keeps you sharp. Panic gets you killed." He looked at her. "I think our dads would have gotten along." Mara smiled. "Yeah, I think so too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the desert wind against the tent canvas. "You staying in?" Rawlins asked eventually. "The Army? Yeah, this is what I do, what I'm good at." "Good, because this unit could use more shooters like you." He stood, stretched. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. Something tells me this was just the beginning for you." He left, and Mara sat alone with her thoughts. The beginning. She thought about the mission, about the fear and pain and moments where she'd been certain she wouldn't survive, about Volkov's interrogation room and the narrow escape and the impossible shot at the fuel tank, about the moment when Cordero's voice came through the radio and called her Watcher 1, not with doubt, but with expectation, about Rawlins's apology and Cross's respect and the way the team now looked at her, not as an outsider or a liability, but as one of them. She thought about her father, watching from wherever he was, hopefully proud of the shooter she'd become. And she thought about the Bronze Star recommendation, the official recognition that what she'd done mattered, that she'd made a difference. Mara Keene, 2nd Lieutenant, designated marksman, Iron Wolf, stood up and walked back to her quarters through the cool desert night. Her body still hurt. Her shoulder ached. Her ribs protested every deep breath. But for the first time since she'd commissioned, since she'd stepped into this world that didn't think she belonged, She felt something she hadn't felt before, certainty. Not that the fighting was over. There would always be people who doubted, who questioned, who assumed. That was part of the deal. But she knew, bone deep and unshakable, that she could handle it, that she had the skill, the courage, and the strength to face whatever came next. They'd looked down on her once, called her dead weight and diversity hire, and not good enough. Now they called her Iron Wolf, and that, she decided, was a name worth living up to. 3 weeks passed before Mara was cleared for full duty. 3 weeks of physical therapy that felt like torture, of watching her team run missions without her, of paperwork and medical evaluations, and the slow, grinding process of bureaucracy turning combat into official record. The Bronze Star recommendation moved up the chain of command. From Cordero to battalion, from battalion to brigade, each level adding signatures and stamps and delays. Mara tried not to think about it, tried to focus on recovery, on rebuilding strength, on becoming operational again. But at night, lying in her bunk, she couldn't help replaying that mission. The shots, the carrier, the interrogation room, every decision, every moment where things could have gone differently. On day 22, Cross declared her fit for combat operations. Ribs are healed, shoulders at 90% function, and your PT scores are back to baseline. Cross made a note on her chart. You're cleared. Try not to get yourself captured again. I'll do my best. See that you do. I'm running out of creative ways to patch you back together. That afternoon, Cordero called her to his office. The command building was quieter than usual, most personnel out on patrol or training exercises. Mara knocked on the doorframe and Cordero waved her in without looking up from his computer. Close the door. Sit. She obeyed, studying his face. He looked tired, new lines etched around his eyes. Bronze Star came through, he said without preamble. Official ceremonies scheduled for next week. Brigadier General Morrison's flying in to present it personally. Mara's breath caught. Sir, There's more. Cordero finally looked at her. Your previous CO, the one who said you weren't suited for combat operations, he's been reassigned. Turns out his eval standards weren't exactly objective. Investigation found a pattern of biased assessments against female officers. He paused. Your file's being scrubbed. Everything he wrote is getting removed. What happens to him? Forced retirement, no pension, and he's lucky that's all he's getting. Cordero leaned back in his chair. Point is, your record's clean now. More than clean. You've got a Bronze Star, commendations from this unit, and combat performance that speaks for itself. That's good news, sir. It is, but it comes with options. He pulled up something on his computer, turned the screen so she could see. Delta's recruiting. They saw your file, saw what you did on that mission. They want to talk to you about assessment and selection. Mara stared at the email. Delta Force. Special Operations. The absolute top tier of military capability. They're serious? Dead serious. You'd have to pass selection, which is no joke. But if you make it through, you'd be one of the first female operators in that unit. He studied her reaction. It's your call. No pressure from me either way. Mara read the email again, processing. Delta meant more training, higher operational tempo, missions that pushed beyond conventional warfare. It meant proving herself all over again, but at a level where gender wouldn't matter, only capability. Can I think about it? Take your time. They're not going anywhere. Cordero closed the laptop. One more thing. We've got a mission briefing tomorrow, 0600 hours. Standard patrol and overwatch in Sector 7. I'm putting you back on rotation if you're ready. I'm ready. Good. Dismissed. Mara stood, started toward the door, then turned back. Sir? Thank you for everything you've done. Cordero nodded once. You earned it, Keen, every bit of it. Now go make sure you stay sharp. Can't have the Iron Wolf getting rusty. She left his office and walked out into the afternoon heat, mind spinning with possibilities. Delta. Bronze Star. A future that suddenly looked very different from what she'd imagined. That evening, she found Rollins at the range, running drills with his rifle. He saw her approach and lowered his weapon. Heard the Bronze Star came through. Congratulations. Thanks. Heard Delta's interested too. His eyebrows rose. Seriously? That's huge. Yeah. Mara picked up a set of ear protection, put them on. Mind if I shoot with you? Be my guest. They fell into an easy rhythm, loading magazines, firing controlled pairs, reloading, repeating. The familiar routine helped settle Mara's thoughts, gave her hands something to do while her brain processed. After 20 minutes, Rollins called a break. They stood in companionable silence, drinking water, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. "You gonna do it?" he asked. "Delta? I don't know yet. Part of me wants to see how far I can push, what I'm really capable of." She paused. "But another part thinks maybe I've already proved enough. Maybe I should just be good at what I do here instead of chasing the next challenge." "What does your gut say?" Mara considered. "My gut says I didn't come this far to play it safe." Rollins smiled. "Then you've got your answer. What about you? Ever think about trying out for special operations?" "Thought about it. Decided I'm good where I am. I like this team, like the mission, like knowing what to expect." He reloaded his rifle. "But that's me. You're different. You've got that thing, that drive to keep pushing. It's going to take you places most people never see. Or get me killed. Maybe. But you'd die doing something that mattered." He shouldered his rifle again. "Come on. Let's run some distance shots. You need to stay sharp if you're going to impress Delta." They spent the next hour shooting at targets from 300 to 600 meters, Mara falling back into the meditative focus of precision marksmanship. Every shot was a conversation between her and the rifle, between her breath and the trigger, between calculation and instinct. By the time darkness fell, she'd made her decision. The mission briefing the next morning was routine. Patrol Sector 7, provide overwatch for a supply convoy, return to base. Nothing like the Canyon compound. Nothing that should require Bronze Star-level heroics. Mara geared up methodically, checking each piece of equipment twice. Rifle, ammunition, radio, medical supplies, water. Everything in its place, everything ready. The team loaded into 2 vehicles at 0630 hours. Cordero rode in the lead truck with Vance, who was back on duty with a slight limp. Mara rode in the second with Rollins, Cross, and a new private named Torres who'd joined the unit last week. Torres kept glancing at Mara like she was a museum exhibit. "Something on your mind, Private?" Mara asked. Torres flushed. "Sorry, ma'am. It's just, I heard about what you did. The Canyon mission. It's kind of legendary. It was one mission. Still, taking out an armored carrier with an RPG? That's crazy." Rollins laughed. "Kid, you don't know the half of it. She also—" "Can we focus on the current mission?" Mara cut in. "This isn't story time." But she caught Rollins' grin and couldn't help smiling herself. The convoy moved through Sector 7 without incident. Dusty roads, abandoned buildings, terrain that had seen too much conflict and not enough peace. Mara took position on a ridge overlooking the route, setting up her rifle with the same precision she'd used that night in the canyon. Range cards, wind readings, sector assignments, all routine, all professional. Nothing happened. The convoy passed through safely, the mission completed without a shot fired. They were back at base by 1400 hours. "See?" Rollins said as they unloaded gear. "Not every mission's a Michael Bay film." "Thank goodness for that. I don't think my ribs could handle another one." The next week passed in similar fashion. Routine patrols, standard operations, the steady rhythm of military life. Mara fell back into the flow, reintegrating with the team, rebuilding the muscle memory of combat operations. But in quiet moments, she kept thinking about Delta, about that email, about the choice in front of her. The Bronze Star ceremony arrived on a Thursday morning, clear and hot, with the entire base formation standing at attention in the motor pool. Brigadier General Morrison was a compact man with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of combat. He stood on a raised platform, Mara beside him, the rest of the unit arrayed in formation below. Cordero read the citation, his voice carrying across the assembly. "For exceptionally valorous actions during combat operations in hostile territory. Second Lieutenant Keene displayed extraordinary courage and tactical proficiency while under intense enemy fire, directly contributing to the successful extraction of a high-value intelligence asset and the preservation of American lives." The words washed over Mara like water. She focused on staying at attention, on breathing steadily, on not letting emotion overwhelm her. Morrison pinned the medal to her uniform, the weight of it surprisingly heavy. He stepped back, saluted. She returned it crisply. "Well done, Lieutenant," Morrison said quietly. "Your country is proud of you." The formation erupted in applause, not the polite golf clapping of formal ceremonies, but genuine enthusiastic recognition. Mara saw Rollins grinning, cross-wiping her eyes, Vance giving her a thumbs up. After the ceremony, Morrison pulled her aside. "Walk with me, Lieutenant." They moved away from the crowd, toward the perimeter where they could talk privately. "I've been briefed on your performance," Morrison said. "Not just the Canyon mission, but your entire record. I'm told you're considering Delta." "Yes, sir. Still deciding. I won't try to influence you either way. That's a personal decision. But I will tell you this. The Army needs more officers like you. Officers who can think under pressure, who lead by example, who don't let anything stop them from completing the mission." He paused. "Wherever you end up, you're going to make a difference. Just make sure it's the difference you want to make." "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Does it get easier? Proving yourself, I mean. Dealing with people who doubt you because of what you are instead of who you are?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "No, it doesn't get easier. But you get better at it. You build a reputation that speaks louder than prejudice. You surround yourself with people who value capability over demographics. And eventually you stop caring what the doubters think, because you know your worth." He offered his hand. Mara shook it. "Whatever you decide," Morrison said, "make it because it's what you want. Not because you're trying to prove something to anyone else." He walked away, leaving Mara standing at the perimeter, looking out at the desert that had nearly killed her, and simultaneously made her into something more than she'd been before. That evening, Mara sat in her quarters with her laptop open, staring at the Delta recruitment email. The cursor blinked in the response field, waiting for her decision. She thought about her father, about those mornings in the Montana woods learning to shoot, learning to breathe, learning that precision and patience were more valuable than brute force. She thought about the Canyon compound, about the moment she'd decided to run toward danger instead of away from it, about the weight of the RPG launcher and the impossible shot at the fuel tank. She thought about Rollins' apology and Cordero's recommendation and the way the team looked at her now, not with doubt, but with respect. She thought about Morrison's words. Make it because it's what you want. What did she want? Mara closed her eyes, took a breath, 4 in, hold, 6 out, and let the answer come. She wanted to keep pushing, wanted to see how far she could go, what she was truly capable of, not because she had something to prove to the doubters, but because she had something to prove to herself. She typed her response to Delta. "I'm interested. When can we schedule the conversation?" Hit send before she could second-guess herself. The reply came back in less than an hour. "Next week. Details to follow." Mara closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of her room, feeling the weight of the bronze star on her uniform, the ache in her healing shoulder, the certainty in her chest that she was making the right choice. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Rollins entered, carrying 2 bottles of water. "Figured you might need one of these after today. Ceremonies are dehydrating." "Thanks." She took the bottle, gestured to the chair. "Sit." He did, studying her face. "You look like you made a decision." "I did. I'm talking to Delta next week." He nodded slowly. "Good. That's good. This unit's going to miss you, though." "I haven't made it through selection yet. Plenty of people don't." "You will." He said it with complete confidence. "Because you don't know how to quit. It's simultaneously your greatest strength and most annoying quality." Mara laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It was meant as one." Rollins stood. "Hey, before you leave for Delta, whenever that is, we should do one more training exercise. Show Torres what real precision shooting looks like." "Deal." He left, and Mara sat alone with her thoughts and her water and the future stretching out before her like an unmapped desert. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation and transition. Conversations with Delta recruiters who asked hard questions about her motivations, her capabilities, her understanding of what selection would entail. Physical training to prepare for the assessment, mental preparation for the reality that she might fail. But underneath it all was a quiet confidence she'd never felt before. Not arrogance, not false bravado, just a bone-deep certainty that she belonged in this world, that she'd earned her place through blood and bullets and refusing to break when everything said she should. On her last day with the unit before transferring to selection, the team gathered for one final training exercise, a long-range shooting competition on the base range, stretching out to 1,000 meters. Mara, Rollins, Vance, and 3 other shooters took turns engaging targets at increasing distances, scoring based on accuracy and speed. It was friendly competition, the kind of bonding that happened when people who respected each other tested their skills. Mara won. Not by much. Rollins pushed her hard, missing by only 2 points, but enough to matter. "Still got it," Rollins said afterward, shaking her hand. "Delta's lucky to get you. If I make it through." "When you make it through." He released her hand. "And when you do, don't forget about us regular operators down here in the conventional world." Never. That evening, Cordero called her to his office one last time. "Your transfer orders came through. You leave for Fort Bragg tomorrow morning, 0800 hours. He handed her a folder. "Everything you need is in there. Contact information, reporting instructions, what to bring." "Thank you, sir." Keen. He waited until she met his eyes. "I've commanded a lot of soldiers, good ones, bad ones, everything in between. You're in the top 5 I've ever worked with, maybe top 3. He paused. "Don't let anyone at Delta tell you different. You belong there." "I appreciate that, sir." "One more thing." He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a small box, handed it to her. "Open it." Inside was a patch, the unit insignia, worn and faded, clearly used. On the back, handwritten in permanent marker, "Iron Wolf, earned 2024. "That's from Rollins," Cordero explained. "He wanted you to have it. Said every wolf needs to remember where they came from." Mara felt her throat tighten. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just make us proud." He stood, extended his hand. "It's been an honor serving with you, Lieutenant." She shook his hand, holding his gaze. "The honor was mine, sir." The next morning, Mara loaded her gear into a transport vehicle for the drive to the airfield. The entire team turned out to see her off, even Torres, who'd been with them barely a month. Cross hugged her tight, whispered, "Don't get captured again. I won't be there to fix you." Vance gave her a fist bump. "Kicked their ass in selection." Rollins was last. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into a brief, hard hug, then stepped back and nodded. She nodded back, understanding everything that didn't need to be said. The vehicle pulled away from Outpost Red Haven as the sun rose over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Mara watched through the window as the base grew smaller, as the people who'd become her team, her family, faded into the distance. But she didn't feel sad. Didn't feel like she was leaving something behind. She felt like she was moving forward, like every shot she'd fired, every challenge she'd faced, every moment of doubt she'd pushed through had been preparing her for this. For the next fight, the next test, the next chance to prove, not to anyone else, but to herself, that she could do the impossible. Fort Bragg was massive, sprawling, professional in a way that made Outpost Red Haven look like a frontier outpost. The Delta selection cadre were stone-faced operators who'd seen and done things Mara could only imagine, and they made it clear from day one that her bronze star meant nothing here. "Everyone here has awards," the selection commander said during in-processing. "Everyone here has combat experience. Everyone here thinks they're special. Most of you will quit in the first week. The rest will quit in the first month. The few who make it through will earn the right to try out for this unit." Maybe. The training was brutal. Ruck marches that seemed endless. Navigation courses through terrain designed to break you. Physical tests that pushed beyond anything Mara had experienced. Mental evaluations that probed for weaknesses, for breaking points, for the moment when you'd give up. Mara didn't give up. When her body screamed for rest, she remembered the canyon compound, remembered running toward that burning truck with an entire enemy force hunting her. When doubt crept in, she remembered Cordero's words, "You earned it." When other candidates quit, and they did, in droves, she remembered the patch in her gear. Iron Wolf earned 2024. 6 weeks into selection, she was still standing, still pushing, still refusing to break. On week 7, during a particularly brutal land navigation course in a rainstorm that turned the forest into a muddy nightmare, Mara found herself lost, exhausted, and questioning whether she'd made the right choice. She was alone, had been for hours. The checkpoint she needed to reach was somewhere in the darkness ahead, but she'd lost the trail, lost her bearings, and was running low on time. This was it. The moment where she could quit. Radio for extraction. Say she'd given it her best shot, but it wasn't enough. Instead, she sat down on a fallen log, pulled out her compass, and did what her father had taught her all those years ago. Breathed. 4 in, hold, 6 out. Focused, evaluated, calculated. Found the quiet. 20 minutes later, she was moving again, following a corrected bearing, pushing through the mud and rain with renewed purpose. She made the checkpoint with 5 minutes to spare. At week 12, the selection cadre called her into an office. 3 instructors sat behind a table, faces neutral, files open in front of them. Second Lieutenant Keene, the senior instructor said, "You've completed the assessment phase. Physically, you're in the top 10%. Mentally, you're solid. Tactically, you show exceptional aptitude." He paused. "But before we move you forward to the next phase, I want to know something. Why are you here?" Mara met his eyes. "To see what I'm capable of, sir." "Not to prove something to people who doubted you?" "I already proved that. This is for me." The instructor studied her for a long moment. Then he closed the file and nodded. "You're moving forward. Welcome to the next phase." Mara felt something settle in her chest. Not relief. Not pride. Just certainty. She belonged here. The final phase of selection was classified. Tasks and tests she couldn't discuss. Scenarios that pushed the boundaries of what she thought possible. By week 18, she was operating on pure will and muscle memory. Her body running on fumes, but her mind sharp as ever. And then, on a cold morning in November, the cadre called the remaining candidates together. 15 people out of the original 100. 15 who'd made it through. The commander stood before them, expression unreadable. "You've completed Delta Force selection. That doesn't make you operators. It makes you candidates for the operator training course. You've earned the right to try. Nothing more." He paused. "For those of you who make it through the full training pipeline, you'll join one of the most capable special operations units in the world. For those who don't, and some of you won't, you'll return to your parent units with the knowledge that you gave everything you had." He read off names. Mara's was 4th on the list. "Lieutenant Keene, you're in." She stood at attention, showing no emotion, but inside she felt something crack open, a wall she'd been carrying for years, built from every doubt, every dismissal, every time someone had looked at her and seen a liability instead of an asset. That wall crumbled to dust, and in its place was something stronger. Belief. Not in what she might become, but in what she already was. 3 months later, after completing the operator training course, Mara received her assignment to a Delta squadron. She stood in the briefing room with her new team, all experienced operators, all watching her with the same evaluating eyes she'd seen 100 times before. The squadron commander introduced her simply. "This is Lieutenant Keene. She's our new precision shooter. She's Bronze Star for Valor, combat proven, and she made it through selection in the top 5%. Any questions?" One operator, a grizzled sergeant major with 25 years in special operations, raised his hand. "Can she shoot?" The commander smiled. "Let's find out. Range, 1,400 hours. Lieutenant, show them what Iron Wolf means." At the range that afternoon, Mara proved it. 10 shots, distances from 800 to 1,500 meters, variable wind, moving and static targets. 10 hits. The sergeant major nodded slowly. "Okay, she can shoot." Another operator, younger, skeptical, asked, "Can she handle herself in close quarters?" Mara met his eyes. "Put me in the shoot house and find out." They did. She cleared rooms with precision and aggression, moving through the live fire course like she'd been doing it her entire life. When she exited the final room, targets down, 0 hits on hostages, the operator who'd questioned her extended his hand. "Welcome to the team." She shook it. "Thanks. Now can we actually train instead of testing?" He laughed. "I like her already." Over the next 6 months, Mara deployed 3 times with her new squadron. Missions she couldn't discuss, in countries she couldn't name, doing things that would never make it into official records. But each mission reinforced the same lesson she'd learned in that canyon compound. Capability earned respect. Results spoke louder than demographics. And when bullets started flying, nobody cared about anything except whether you could do the job. She could do the job. Better than that, she excelled at it. On her fourth deployment, during a high-risk hostage rescue, Mara made a shot that the after-action review called impossible, but executed perfectly. A 1,847-meter engagement against a target partially obscured by vehicle glass in 20-mile-per-hour crosswinds at night. One shot, one kill. Mission success. The squadron commander pulled her aside afterward. That shot's going in the training manual, and I'm recommending you for the Silver Star. Sir, I was just doing the impossible. Again. He smiled. You've got a gift, Keen, and you've earned every opportunity we've given you. Stop being surprised when people recognize it. Years passed. Deployments stacked up. Mara's reputation grew. Not as a female operator, not as a diversity milestone, but simply as one of the best precision shooters in special operations. She trained new operators, sharing the lessons her father had taught her about breathing and patience and the quiet space between heartbeats. She mentored younger soldiers who faced the same doubts she'd overcome. She continued pushing herself, continued proving, not to anyone else anymore, but to the person she saw in the mirror. And sometimes, late at night, after particularly difficult missions, she'd pull out that worn unit patch from Outpost Red Haven. Iron Wolf. Earned 2024. She'd hold it, remember the desert and the canyon, and the moment she'd decided to run toward danger instead of away from it. That moment had changed everything. 5 years after the canyon mission, Mara received a message from Cordero. He'd been promoted to colonel, was commanding a brigade now, still fighting the same fights in different forms. His email was brief. Heard about your Silver Star. Knew you'd make us proud. The team still talks about you. Rollins says to tell you the Iron Wolf legend lives on. Stay safe out there. Cordero Mara replied simply, Thank you for believing in me when it mattered. Keen. She never heard back, didn't need to. Some things were understood without words. 10 years after the Canyon mission, Mara stood in front of a new class of officer candidates at the Infantry Officer Basic course, invited to speak about leadership under pressure. She looked at the young faces staring up at her, some eager, some skeptical, some clearly wondering what a woman could teach them about combat. She recognized that look, had seen it 1,000 times. My name is Major Mara Keen, she began. Call sign Iron Wolf. And I'm going to tell you about a night in the desert when everything went wrong, and what I learned about earning respect when everyone expects you to fail. She told them about Outpost Red Haven, about Rollins's contempt in the mission briefing and the impossible shot at the fuel tank, about capture and escape and refusing to quit when quitting was the logical choice. She told them about the moment she'd realized that respect wasn't given. It was earned, one decision at a time, one challenge at a time, one refusal to break at a time. Some of you in this room will face people who doubt you, she said, who look at you and see what you are instead of who you are, who assume you can't handle the pressure before you've even had a chance to try. She paused. When that happens, you have two choices. You can let their doubt define you, or you can prove them wrong so completely that their doubt becomes irrelevant. She held up the worn unit patch, the one she carried with her everywhere. This patch was given to me by a man who thought I was dead weight, who openly said I didn't belong. And then he watched me do the impossible, and he changed his mind. She smiled. Not because I argued with him, not because I complained about unfairness, but because I showed him, through action, through results, through refusing to break, that he was wrong. The room was silent. That's what I want you to remember, Mara continued. When the pressure's on, when people doubt you, when everything says you should quit, that's when you decide who you really are. Not with words, with action, with courage, with the choice to keep moving forward even when forward seems impossible. She finished the talk, answered questions, and watched the candidates file out. One young woman lingered behind, waiting until the room emptied. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Go ahead. How did you deal with it? The doubt, the skepticism, the constant need to prove yourself. Didn't it ever make you want to quit? Mara thought about the question, about that night in the canyon, about every mission since. Every single day. she said honestly. But then I'd remember something my father taught me. That fear's just information. It tells you the stakes are high. It doesn't tell you what to do about it. She met the young officer's eyes. The day you stop being afraid is the day you stop caring. So be afraid, be uncertain, be doubted, and then do it anyway. The woman nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am. Mara watched her leave, saw in her posture and determination the same fire that had driven her through that canyon, through selection, through every impossible moment since. The cycle continued. New generations facing old doubts, new soldiers proving what capability looked like when given the chance. And Mara Keene, Iron Wolf, Bronze Star recipient, Delta Force operator, mentor, and leader, knew that her greatest legacy wasn't the mission she'd completed or the award she'd earned. It was the path she'd cleared for everyone who came after her. The proof that belonging wasn't about demographics or politics or checkboxes on a diversity form. It was about what you did when the bullets started flying, about who you became when everything was on the line, about the choice to keep moving forward when every reason said to stop. She'd made that choice in a canyon compound 10 years ago when she'd run toward a burning truck with an RPG launcher and refused to accept that survival was impossible. And she'd kept making it every day since, not because she had something to prove to the doubters anymore. Those voices had faded, replaced by the respect of people who mattered, by the certainty that came from knowing her own worth. But because proving herself had never been the point was becoming the kind of soldier, the kind of leader, the kind of person who showed up when it mattered and did what needed doing, regardless of the cost. That was what Iron Wolf meant. That was what she'd earned in blood and bullets and broken ribs and the quiet space between heartbeats where courage lives. And that was what she'd carry forward into whatever battles came next, for as long as she had breath in her lungs and strength in her hands. Because respect isn't given. It's earned in the moment you refuse to break, when everyone expects you to fall, and you stand instead. They looked down on her once, until she proved that courage doesn't ask for permission, it simply acts. And in that action, everything changes. Respect isn't given by words, it's earned in the moment you refuse to break.